Right at the cemetery after my grandmother's burial, just as my father turned his back to head to his car, her trusted attorney suddenly touched my elbow. Leaning in close, he lowered his voice to a chilling whisper. Your grandmother didn't die naturally. Come to my office alone tonight, and whatever you do, don't tell your father. You are in danger. Those words made the ground feel like it was tilting under my feet, leaving me suffocating with shock. After that, I rushed to the meeting place only to completely freeze when the office door opened and revealed the man waiting inside. Take a breath with me before we begin. Before we continue, leave a comment. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Just yes or no. Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs today. Some details have been adjusted for storytelling purposes. The message what really matters is what I hope stays with you. I am Audrey Russell, 26 years old, and I buried my grandmother this morning without knowing she was murdered. The October drizzle had stopped by the time the last mourners left Greenwood Memorial Cemetery, but the grass around Eleanor Russell's grave was still dark with rain. I stood at the edge of the plot watching water bead on the polished wood of her casket, trying to memorize the shape of it before they lowered her into the ground. She had been 78 when she died 2 days ago, a sharp-minded retired schoolteacher who raised me after my mother left when I was 8. The doctors said heart failure, natural causes, an old woman's body finally giving out. I believed them. My father, Charles Russell, stood beside the grave in a pressed black suit, his face arranged in grief that looked completely real to me then. He was 52, successful in commercial real estate, the kind of man who remembered every name at every party and sent handwritten thank you notes. The last person I would have suspected of anything darker than ambition. My younger brother Austin, 24, and barely a month out of college, stood directly across from me with his eyes fixed on the wet ground at his feet. He hadn't looked at Dad once all morning. I noticed. I didn't understand. The crowd thinned slowly. Distant cousins I recognized from old photographs. Eleanor's bridge club, 4 women in their 70s who had known her for decades. Former students who still remembered the way she taught Shakespeare. Each person pressed my hand, murmured something gentle, and drifted toward the parking lot. The cemetery grew quiet around us the way cemeteries do when the living finally run out of reasons to stay. That's when Arthur Hayes found me. Arthur had been Eleanor's estate attorney for 30 years. He was 62, silver-haired, with the careful movements of a man who understood that words carried weight. He waited until my father's back was turned, and his footsteps were already fading toward his car before touching my elbow with 2 fingers, barely a touch at all, but deliberate. Audrey, he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I need to speak with you. Tonight. My office. 8 o'clock. Come alone. I started to ask why. He shook his head slightly. Your grandmother didn't die naturally. His grip tightened just once before releasing. Whatever you do, don't tell your father. You could be in danger. He walked away between the headstones before I could form a single word. I stood there while the ground seemed to tilt beneath my feet, rain soaking through my shoes, staring at the space where he had been. The casket was being lowered now. Eleanor was going into the earth. And I had just learned she might have been murdered. Task 1.2. Arthur had given me one instruction before I left his office. Go home, act normal, and don't sign anything Charles put in front of me. The plan assumed I could pretend my world hadn't just collapsed inward, like a building with no foundation left. The house looked exactly the same as always. Porch light on, Dad's car in the driveway. Warm yellow light visible through the living room curtains. Every detail shouting safety and home in a language I no longer trusted. I sat in my car for 2 full minutes, practicing my face in the rearview mirror. Tired daughter, grieving granddaughter, nothing more. My hands were trembling against the steering wheel. I held them there until they stopped. When I walked through the front door, Dad was standing in the living room with his phone in one hand, his expression shifting immediately into something warm and relieved. "There you are," he said. "I was getting worried. Arthur kept you late." "Just estate paperwork," I said. "You know how lawyers are." Austin sat in the armchair by the window, completely still, eyes fixed on his own hands in his lap. He didn't look up when I came in. He didn't acknowledge me at all. Dad gestured toward the coffee table. A thick stack of legal documents lay spread across it, organized into neat sections, with colored tabs marking every signature line. Dense text formal language, the kind of paperwork that required a specialist to explain. "I know the timing feels terrible," Dad said, settling onto the couch with practiced ease. "But we need to handle Eleanor's estate properly. These are trust documents, standard procedure to protect you and Austin from estate taxes and make sure everything transfers cleanly." He slid the stack toward me across the table. "Grandma would have wanted this taken care of. It's what's best for the family." I picked up the top page. The date printed in the header stopped my breath. 3 weeks ago. My grandmother had still been alive 3 weeks ago. My father had prepared inheritance documents before Eleanor was dead. "Just sign where the tabs are," Dad continued. "We're family. This is routine." Routine. The word moved through me like something cold. I set the page down carefully. "I can't do this tonight, Dad. The funeral. Everything, I'm exhausted. Can we do this tomorrow?" His smile tightened at the corners. "Just slightly. Just enough." "Of course, sweetheart. Take all the time you need." But his eyes didn't say that. His eyes said hurry. I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, and locked the door behind me for the first time in my life. I didn't sleep. At 6:45 a.m., I slipped out while Dad was still in his bedroom. Austin's car was already in the Safeway parking lot when I arrived, engine running, windows fogged from the inside. He unlocked the passenger door. I climbed in, and heat hit me. He'd been waiting with the heater on full blast. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "Since 6:30. His face was pale, unshaven eyes, red-rimmed. "I couldn't stay in that house." He pulled a laptop from the back seat, hands shaking. "3 days before Grandma died, I saw Dad printing documents at midnight. I came downstairs for water and heard the printer running. He was in his office watching pages come out one after another." "What kind of documents?" I didn't know then, but something about the way he looked at them. Austin opened the laptop. The next morning, when he left for work, I installed a data scanner on the printer. Every page that goes through captures to the cloud. He turned the screen toward me. A folder labeled October contained dozens of PDFs. He clicked on one dated 5 days ago, the day before Eleanor's funeral. "This is what I found. Trust agreement. My name at the top. Austin's below it. Charles Russell listed as trustee. Pages of dense legal text about estate distribution and tax shelters." "Keep scrolling," Austin said. I scrolled through pages of boilerplate language. Page 3, page 7, page 10. Nothing unusual. Page 14. One paragraph buried in contingency provisions. "In the event of the primary beneficiary's sudden death within 12 months of execution, all assets held in trust shall permanently and irrevocably transfer to the sole discretion of the designated trustee, superseding all other claims." I read it 3 times. It said everything Dad never would. If I signed and then died within a year, everything went to him. Not to Austin. Not split between siblings. Everything. Eleanor's house is worth $2.4 million, the investments, the insurance policies, all of it. And Austin would get nothing. "He planned it before she even died," I said, "preparing the paperwork to steal her inheritance. And to kill you next." Austin gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. "Get you to sign, then make sure you don't live long enough to realize what you agreed to." I stared at the screen, seeing Eleanor's blood will instead. If I die suddenly, Charles Russell is responsible. She had known he was coming for her inheritance and wouldn't stop with her. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. I didn't know if you'd believe me. I'm 24. You're the responsible one, the one Dad always liked better. I was accusing our father of. He stopped. I knew at the funeral. I've known for 5 days. But I couldn't say anything while Grandma was alive because, what if I was wrong? It's not too late, I said. Arthur gave me Eleanor's blood will last night. She knew what Dad was doing. She hired a private investigator. She built a case. Austin stared at me. She knew for 6 months. Jesus. He dropped his head against the steering wheel. She knew and just documented it. Built evidence. Waited to die. She was protecting us. If she'd accused him without proof, we'd never have believed her. He would have made her look confused. Or paranoid. Crazy, Austin finished. An old woman with delusions. The parking lot was filling with early morning shoppers. Normal people buying groceries for normal families. What do we do now? Austin asked. We go home. Act normal. Don't sign anything. Wait for Arthur and Garrett to tell us the next step. How long do you think we have? I thought about Dad's tightened smile last night when I said I needed more time. Not long. Be careful, Audrey. If he suspects you know. I know. I opened the car door. Don't come home until after 7. Give me time alone with him. That's the worst idea I've ever heard. I need to make him think I'm considering signing. If we're both avoiding him, he'll know something's wrong. I drove home separately, practicing my face in the rearview mirror. Tired daughter, grieving granddaughter. Nothing more. Dad was in the kitchen at 8:30. The coffee maker gurgled, filling the house with a dark roast smell, the expensive kind he only bought for special occasions. Morning, sweetheart, he said without turning. His voice was warm, easy, the same voice that had read me bedtime stories at 6. Made you coffee. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, I said. He placed a mug before me. Steam rose from the surface. I wrapped my hands around it, feeling the heat. Have you had a chance to look at the trust documents? His tone was patient, conversational, but his eyes were watchful. I took a small sip. The coffee was bitter strong. I forced it down. Not yet, Dad. I need a little more time. Yesterday was overwhelming. Of course. He nodded, pulling out the chair across from me. Take all the time you need. But his eyes weren't warm anymore. They were measuring me. Calculating. How much time do you need to sign your own death warrant? How long can I wait before you become too dangerous? I smiled at my father over the rim of my coffee cup and thought how many times had he smiled at Grandma the same way. Every interaction with him was now deadly theater. One wrong word, one misplaced expression, and he might decide I knew too much. That waiting was more dangerous than acting. I took another sip of coffee and wondered if he'd already started poisoning me. Charles's eyes held mine for exactly 3 seconds longer than comfortable. Then he smiled, the same warm, patient smile he'd given me my whole life. But something flickered behind it. Something cold. Something measuring. He was calculating how long he could wait before I became too dangerous to keep alive. And I still hadn't heard the recordings Eleanor left behind. At 2 p.m., I told Dad I was going to the gym. He smiled and told me to take my time. We both knew I was lying. We both knew he knew. The warehouse smelled like rust and sea salt and secrets that had waited too long to be heard. Garrett Thornton was waiting inside when Austin and I arrived, standing beside a folding table with a laptop and a small wooden box. The building was abandoned, part of the old Port Industrial District that had been slated for redevelopment for years. Broken windows high on the walls let in strips of gray afternoon light. Thank you for coming, Garrett said. His voice echoed in the empty space. Austin looked around nervously. Why here? Because your father doesn't know about this location, and what I'm about to show you can't happen anywhere he might be watching. Garrett opened the laptop and positioned it so we could both see the screen. Then he made a video call. Arthur Hayes's face appeared, his office visible behind him. Audrey, Austin. Arthur nodded gravely. What you're about to hear is legally admissible evidence. Garrett and I will serve as witnesses that you heard it in our presence. Heard what? I asked. Garrett picked up the wooden box and opened it. Inside, nestled in foam, was a hearing aid. Small, beige, unremarkable. The kind you'd see on any elderly person and never think twice about. Eleanor came to me 6 months ago, Garrett said. She was experiencing symptoms she couldn't explain. Heart racing, hair falling out, nausea that came and went. She suspected her son was poisoning her, but she had no proof. So she asked me to help her get it. He held up the hearing aid. 5 months ago, Eleanor brought me this device, Garrett continued. I custom modified the internal memory chip for continuous ambient recording, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every conversation Eleanor had every sound in her presence recorded. She didn't tell either of you because she didn't want to put you in danger until she had definitive proof. Austin was staring at the floor. Grandma told me not to tell anyone, not even you, Audrey. She didn't want to scare us if she was wrong. 5 months of data, Garrett continued. 147 hours of recorded audio after filtering for voice activity. I've condensed it to the 3 most crucial files, the ones that prove everything. My hand hovered over the laptop keyboard. Once I pressed play, there was no going back. The father I knew would be gone forever. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who came to every debate tournament, who cried at my college graduation, that man would cease to exist. In his place would be only a murderer. But Eleanor had worn this device every day for 5 months, documenting her own death so that Austin and I would know the truth, so that we would be protected. I looked at Garrett. Play them. He clicked a file labeled Fragment 1, September 20th, 0604 a.m. Static first. Then the unmistakable sound of a phone ringing. A click as someone answered. My father's voice, rough with sleep, and whispered urgency. Julian, it's in the tea. Make sure she signs the supplemental clause before it takes effect. A pause. My father listening to the other end of the conversation. No, she doesn't suspect anything yet. But we need to move faster. If she figures it out before the signature, movement, a door opening, footsteps approaching whatever room Eleanor had been in when she recorded this. Eleanor's voice trembling but clear. I won't sign Charles. Please. You're my son. Go back to bed, Mom. My father's voice loud now, no longer whispering. You're confused. It's early. I'm not confused. I know what you're doing. A sound like glass being placed down heavily on a table. Then footsteps walking away. A door closing. Silence. The file ended. 17 seconds. That's all it took to destroy 26 years of loving a man who never existed. Garrett closed the laptop. None of us moved. Arthur's face on the video call was frozen in an expression of professional grief. He'd heard this before, but it still hurt him. That's my father's voice, I said. My own voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. That's his voice poisoning his mother. Yes, Garrett said quietly. And Julian, whoever Julian is, was helping him. Yes? Austin had his hands pressed against his face. His shoulders were shaking. I realized he was crying silently, the way you cry when you don't want anyone to hear. I thought about this morning. Dad making me coffee. The expensive dark roast he only bought for special occasions. The way he'd watched me drink it. Had he already started? Was I being poisoned right now, slowly, the same way Eleanor had been? What was in the tea? I asked. We won't know until the autopsy report is complete, Arthur said from the screen. But based on Eleanor's symptoms over those 5 months, the medical examiner suspects a cardiac glycoside. Something that mimics heart failure. Small doses over time. So it would look natural. Exactly. And the supplemental clause? Garrett pulled up another document on the laptop. We found it in the printer logs Austin captured. It's an addendum to the trust giving Charles power of attorney over Eleanor's medical decisions if she became mentally incapacitated. He needed her signature to authorize it, so he could put her in a facility. I said, understanding flooding through me. Control her medical care. Make sure the poisoning continued without anyone interfering. That was the plan, Garrett confirmed. But Eleanor refused to sign, so he had to accelerate. The warehouse felt colder suddenly. Through the broken windows, I could hear seagulls crying and the distant sound of container ships in the harbor. Normal sounds, normal world. Except nothing was normal anymore. Austin reached over and took my hand. Neither of us said anything. There was nothing left to say. The first audio fragment had proven Charles was a murderer, not an accusation, not a suspicion, but documented fact. His voice, his words, his plan. But Garrett had said there were 3 files. If the first one destroyed my father, what would the second and third do? There are 2 more, I said. It wasn't a question. Garrett nodded slowly. Fragment 2 reveals the scope of the conspiracy. Fragment 3. He paused. Fragment 3 is from Eleanor's final 24 hours. It's the hardest to hear, but it's also the most important. I looked at Austin. His face was pale, streaked with tears, but his jaw was set. He nodded once. Play them, I said. Fragment 2 would reveal how deep the conspiracy went. Fragment 3 would show us how Eleanor died. And then we would know everything we needed to destroy the man who used to be my father. Garrett's finger hovered over the laptop trackpad, and I realized I wasn't ready to hear my grandmother die. But ready or not, she had recorded it for us. She had made sure we would know. Fragment 2, Garrett said quietly and clicked play. Static. Then a phone ringing. Charles's voice answering late at night, whispered and urgent. Julian. She changed the lock. I can't get into the safe. She knows something. A pause. The other person, Julian speaking, but too quiet to hear through the phone. I need you to sign the psychiatric evaluation. Paranoid delusion, declining cognitive function, whatever language makes it stick. I'll file it with the court tomorrow to request forced medical access. Once I have conservatorship, the lock doesn't matter. Another pause. No, she won't fight it. She's too weak now. The dosage is working. Another week, maybe 2, and it's over. But I need legal access before she does something stupid like calling the police or changing the will. Click. The call ended. Silence. Garrett stopped the recording. Fragment 2 was captured 2 weeks before Eleanor died. The conservatorship filing was submitted to King County Court on September 24th. Eleanor died before the hearing could take place. Who's Julian? Austin asked. His voice was hollow. Julian Whitfield, Garrett said. 50 years old, a doctor, your father's business partner for the last 10 years, and according to Eleanor's notes, his romantic partner for the last 5. The words hung in the warehouse air. My father had a partner I'd never heard of. A doctor who could prescribe medication, sign psychiatric evaluations, provide medical cover for slow murder. Fragment 3, Garrett said. This is the hardest one. It's from Eleanor's final 24 hours. Are you sure you want to hear it? I nodded. I had to. Garrett clicked the file. This time there was no phone call, no conversation. Just Eleanor's voice, barely above a whisper, speaking directly into the hearing aid as if she knew we would be listening one day. Audrey Austin. Her voice was weak, trembling. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And you need to know your father is gone too. The man I raised, the man who was my son, he died years ago. What's left is something else. Something I don't recognize. A ragged breath. He's been poisoning me. Slowly. Carefully. I don't know how much time I have left. Hours, maybe. I can feel it in my chest and my heartbeat. It's irregular now. Skipping. She was trying to tell us where. She almost made it. The real will, the one that protects you, I hid it inside a sound. A door crashing open. Footsteps fast and heavy. Mom, what are you doing? Charles's voice sharp with suspicion. Who are you talking to? No one. I was praying. Praying. He didn't believe her. Julian's here. He's going to check your vitals. You don't look well. Another set of footsteps. Lighter. More measured. A new voice. Male. Calm. Clinical. Cold in a way that made my skin crawl. Good evening, Eleanor. Let's take a look at you. I don't need a doctor, Eleanor said. Her voice was stronger, now defiant. I need you both to leave my house. Mom, you're being irrational. I'm not signing anything. Not the conservatorship, not the trust revision, nothing. You're not my son anymore, Charles. You're a stranger wearing his face. Silence for 3 seconds. Then the cold voice Julian spoke again. Give me the syringe, Charles? What? No, we were supposed to. She knows too much. We're out of time. Give it to me. Sounds of struggle. Eleanor's voice crying out. Furniture scraping across the floor. Then a soft gasp. A sigh that sounded like air leaving a tire. And then nothing. The file ended. I stood motionless. The warehouse around me felt distant, unreal. Through a crack in the wall, I could see the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle catching the last light of afternoon. Normal city. Normal day. But I had just heard my grandmother murdered. I had heard her final words cut short. I had heard her die. The rage came first hot and sharp and overwhelming. Then it froze into something colder, something harder. Determination. Austin was crying again, but silently now, tears streaming down his face without sound. Garrett closed the laptop. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry you had to hear that. She wanted us to hear it, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. She recorded it on purpose. She knew we'd need proof. Yes, and now we have it. Yes. Garrett stood and walked to a metal cabinet against the wall. He pulled out a folder and brought it back to the table. I've been building a case for 6 months. Everything Eleanor documented. Financial records showing Charles's debts. Medical records showing Eleanor's declining health. The hearing aid recordings. The blood will. Austin's printer logs. He spread the papers across the table. You could leave tonight, he said, looking at both of us. I'll coordinate with Seattle PD, work with Arthur to handle the legal side. You and Austin would be safe, out of the city, out of reach, while we bring Charles and Julian to justice. I shook my head. If we run, they win. They get the house, the insurance, everything, and nobody ever knows what they did to her. They'll go to prison, Garrett said. That's not enough. I looked at the folder at 6 months of Eleanor's careful documentation. She didn't just want them punished, she wanted her grandchildren protected. She wanted the truth known. If Austin and I disappear, Charles controls the narrative. He becomes the grieving son whose children abandoned him. Garrett studied me. How far are you willing to go? I picked up the hearing aid from the table. So small, so ordinary. Something you'd see on any elderly person and never think twice about. But Eleanor had turned it into a weapon. She had weaponized her own disability, her own death to protect us. Now it was mine. All the way, I said. Garrett studied me for a long moment, measuring whether I meant it. Then he nodded slowly and spread a map of Seattle on the table alongside the documents. Then we have work to do. I looked at Austin. His face was still wet with tears, but his jaw was set. He nodded once. We were going to war against our own father. But first we needed to find what Eleanor died trying to tell us. We left the warehouse at dusk and drove separately to Eleanor's Ballard house. The neighborhood was quiet, streetlights just beginning to flicker on. I used the spare key she'd given me years ago, the one she'd pressed into my hand, with a smile telling me I'd always have a place to come home to. Eleanor's house still smelled like her lavender and old books and the tea that killed her. Austin stood in the doorway, frozen. I can't believe she's not here. She is, I said. Just not the way we want. We climbed the stairs to her bedroom. The house felt too quiet, too empty. Every creak of the floorboards echoed. The bedroom was exactly as she'd left it, bed, made with hospital corners, reading glasses on the nightstand, a stack of library books about gardening that she'd never finish. Austin walked to the dresser and stopped. Fragment 3, he said quietly. She said, I hid it inside the wham before they stopped her. The music box. She kept it on her dresser my whole life. I looked where he was pointing. An ebony music box sat in the center of the dresser, polished and elegant. Antique, probably 100 years old. I'd seen it 1,000 times growing up. She never let anyone touch it, I said. I asked her once what was inside. She said, something precious. Austin picked it up carefully, turning it over in his hands. It's heavier than it should be. The music box had 3 brass keys on the side, the kind you turn to wind the mechanism and make it play. Austin turned the first key. A single note chimed. "Wait," I said. She was specific. She hid it inside the music box. Not just in the box. Inside the mechanism. Austin looked at the keys. 3 of them, each producing a different note when turned. "The lullaby," he said suddenly. "She used to hum it every time she held us. When we were babies, when we were scared, when we needed comfort." "Hush, little baby," I whispered. Austin began turning the keys in sequence. First key twice, second key once, third key once, first key again. The music box played 4 notes as the hidden drawer opened. I recognized the melody immediately. It was the song Grandma hummed every time she held us. The same notes she'd sung when I scraped my knee at 7, when Austin broke his arm at 10, when Mom left, and we thought the world was ending. A dry click echoed from the bottom of the box. Austin turned it over. A secret compartment had opened in the base. Inside, wrapped in a clear plastic bag, was a small envelope and a micro SD card the size of my thumbnail. My hands shook as I took them out. "She hid it in the song she sang us," Austin said. His voice cracked. "She knew we'd remember." I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single piece of paper, Eleanor's handwriting shaky but deliberate. "Audrey Austin, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better. I'm sorry you have to know what your father became. I'm sorry I can't be there to help you through what comes next. Trust Arthur. Trust Garrett. They're good men who will fight for you when I can't anymore. The drive has everything. The real will, the video, everything you need to be safe. Don't let grief make you hesitate. Don't let mercy make you weak. What they did to me, they will try to do to you. Stop them. I love you both more than my last breath." "Grandma." Austin pulled out his laptop from his backpack. His hands were steadier than mine as he inserted the micro SD card into the reader. 2 files appeared on the screen. The first was labeled will_final_revision_September_2023.pdf. Austin opened it. A legal document filled the screen, properly formatted, notarized, witnessed. Eleanor's digital will dated 3 weeks before she died. I scanned the text. "I, Eleanor Marie Russell, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my entire estate to be divided equally between my grandchildren Audrey Russell and Austin Russell. Total estimated value $4.2 million, including primary residence at 4847 Ballard Avenue, valued at $2.4 million, and life insurance policy payout of $1.8 million. Austin and I, equal heirs. Nothing to Charles. Nothing to any trust he controlled. This was the real will, the one Eleanor had hidden because she knew Charles would destroy it. The second file was labeled evidence_kitchen_September_22_0514am.mp4. Austin looked at me. I nodded. He clicked play. The video was shaky. Filmed from a low angle, Eleanor must have propped her phone up somewhere in the dining room, pointing toward the kitchen. The timestamp read 5:14 a.m. Dim light filtered through the kitchen window. Morning, just before dawn. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Just an empty kitchen. Then Charles entered the frame. He was wearing a bathrobe, hair disheveled from sleep. He moved quietly, checking over his shoulder twice before approaching the counter where Eleanor's teapot sat, the one she used every morning for her herbal tea. He pulled something from his robe pocket. A small glass vial no bigger than my thumb. He unscrewed the cap. Then, with practiced efficiency, he tipped white powder from the vial into the teapot. Not much. Maybe half a teaspoon. Enough to dissolve into hot water without leaving visible residue. He screwed the cap back on, pocketed the vial, glanced around one more time, then walked out of frame. The video continued for another 30 seconds, empty kitchen teapot on counter, morning light, growing brighter before it ended. Austin and I sat in silence. She filmed him. With shaking hands and failing lungs, she pointed her phone at the kitchen doorway and filmed him. She gave us everything we needed to win. She knew, Austin whispered. She knew he was coming. She set up the phone and waited. And then she drank the tea anyway, I said, because if she didn't, he'd know she was onto him, and we'd never get this evidence. The video ended. Charles's face was frozen on the laptop screen, caught in the act by the woman he was murdering. Eleanor had spent her final months gathering 3 types of evidence: audio recordings that proved conspiracy, legal documents that protected our inheritance, and now this video proof of murder in progress. But the question remained, would it be enough to put my father in prison for life? We needed to know if what Eleanor gave us could actually convict him. The answer came the next morning in Garrett's office. The lab report landed on his desk with the weight of a death warrant mine. Eleanor sent this tea sample 4 months ago, Garrett said, spreading the pages across the desk so Austin and I could see. She suspected she was being poisoned, but she needed proof. The lab found a synthetic biological compound. It gradually weakens heart muscle. Over time, it causes what looks like spontaneous cardiac arrest, sudden death, that appears completely natural on conventional autopsy tests. I stared at the chemical formula printed on the page. Letters and numbers that meant nothing to me but had killed my grandmother. So the video proves Dad was using it, I said. That's good, right? That's evidence. It is, Garrett said. But there's more. He pulled out another page, this one marked with yellow highlighter. Eleanor realized something the lab didn't notice at first. This compound, if someone with specific genetic markers ingested it, doesn't just weaken the heart gradually. It triggers immediate anaphylactic shock. Throat closes, heart races, full collapse within 30 minutes. And it looks exactly like a severe allergic reaction, accidental death. The room felt colder suddenly. What genetic markers? Austin asked. Garrett looked directly at me. Yours. The floor seemed to tilt. Mine. Eleanor had genetic testing done on herself 6 months ago. Then she paid for yours without telling you. Through one of those ancestry services. She compared the markers. He tapped the highlighted section. You inherited the same enzyme deficiency she had. Same genetic vulnerability to this specific compound. The only difference is, at her age, it worked slowly. At yours, with your allergy profile, it would be catastrophic and immediate. Julian Whitfield had been my family doctor since I was 12. He knew exactly how to kill me and make it look like an accident. They weren't just planning to poison me like they poisoned Grandma, I said slowly. They were planning to make it look like I died from allergies. Something I'd had my whole life. Something nobody would question. Yes, Garrett said. Julian has your complete medical history. He knows you're allergic to shellfish, to certain antibiotics, to bee stings. He could slip this compound into anything you ate or drank at your father's house. And when you collapsed 30 minutes later, he'd be the family doctor who certified cause of death as anaphylactic shock from unknown allergen exposure. Tragic. Accidental. Case closed. Austin stood abruptly and walked to the window. His shoulders were shaking. I sat perfectly still, processing. That's why Eleanor sent the tea sample. She figured out they were going to kill me next. That I was vulnerable in a different way than she was. She saved your life 4 months before she died, Garrett said quietly. By documenting the compound and proving it would kill you fast. Now we know what to look for. Now we can test anything they give you and catch them in the act. The door to Garrett's office opened. Arthur Hayes walked in, his face grim. We have a problem, he said without preamble. He pulled a legal document from his briefcase and placed it on the desk beside the lab report. Julian Whitfield filed a psychiatric evaluation with King County Court this morning. He's requesting emergency conservatorship proceedings over Audrey. What? I grabbed the document. The words blurred as I tried to read them. He claims you're in a grief-induced, incapacitated state following Eleanor's death. Unable to make sound decisions, vulnerable to manipulation. He's requesting that the court appoint Charles Russell as your conservator, with full legal authority over your property, medical decisions, and personal affairs. That's insane, Austin said, turning from the window. She's 26 years old. She's perfectly capable. I know that, Arthur said. And you know that. But Julian Whitfield is a licensed physician with 30 years of practice. His signature on a psychiatric evaluation carries weight with judges, especially when the person being evaluated just lost a close family member. When's the hearing? Garrett asked. Arthur's jaw tightened. 10 days, October 19th. 10 days. I had 10 days to destroy them before they destroyed me legally. If the court approves this, Arthur continued, Charles becomes your conservator before we can expose anything. He'll have full authority over your life, where you live, what medical treatment you receive, who you can see, what you can sign. And critically, he paused, making sure I was listening. Once he's your conservator, you lose legal standing to testify against him in most proceedings. The court considers you incompetent. Your testimony becomes challengeable. So they're using the law as a weapon, I said, just like they used medicine. Exactly, Arthur said. And they're moving fast because they know we're moving too. Charles called my office yesterday asking about Eleanor's estate. He knows you met with me at the funeral. He's getting nervous. Good, Austin said. Let him be nervous. Nervous people are dangerous people, Garrett said. He stood and walked to a whiteboard mounted on his wall. We have evidence, audio recordings, video, lab reports, Eleanor's will. But we need more than evidence, we need a conviction. And to get that, we need to catch them in the act with witnesses present and law enforcement ready. In 10 days, I said. In 10 days, Garrett confirmed. Before that conservatorship hearing, because if Charles gains legal control over you, none of this evidence matters. He'll have you declared incompetent, institutionalized if necessary, and silenced permanently. Arthur placed the conservatorship filing on the desk beside the lab report. 2 documents. One proved they were killing me with science. The other proved they were trying to silence me with law. 10 days until the court hearing. 10 days before Charles gained legal control over every aspect of my life, including whether I lived or died. We had evidence, but we needed a plan to use it before time ran out. The plan came together that afternoon. Garrett spread the blueprint of my childhood home across the warehouse table like we were planning a heist, which in a way, we were. We need 3 types of evidence, Garrett said, tapping the blueprint. Physical proof that poison exists at the house right now, catching them in the act of attempting to use it, and Eleanor's recordings to establish premeditation and prior conspiracy. 2, we have. 1, we need. How do we get physical proof without them knowing we're looking? I asked. Austin leaned over the blueprint. IoT environmental sensors. They look like smart plugs. You plug them into outlets throughout the house, but I can reprogram them to detect chemical anomalies in the air. If there's poison being stored or prepared anywhere in the house, the sensors will pick up trace amounts and alert your phone in real time with encrypted messages. How fast can you build them? Garrett asked. 2 days, maybe 3. The hardware exists, I just need to modify the firmware and test it. And the legal question, I said. If we're placing surveillance devices in Dad's house, here's the critical part. Garrett pulled out a document from his briefcase. Eleanor's property deed. She added your name as co-owner 2 years ago. You own half of that house legally. You have 4th Amendment standing to place monitoring devices on your own property. It's not unlawful search if you're the owner. I stared at the deed, my name beside Eleanor's in careful legal text. She'd planned this too. 2 years ago, she'd made sure I'd have legal right to protect myself in the house where she knew Charles would try to kill me. How does this work with Seattle PD? Austin asked. Garrett pulled out his phone and made a call. Detective Cordova, it's Thornton. I'm ready to brief you on the Russell case. We have audio-video lab reports and a plan to catch them actively. I need 48 hours to get the monitoring equipment in place, Then we'll need a tactical unit on standby. He listened for a moment. Yes, attempted murder in progress. Multiple suspects. I'll have the warrant request on your desk by tomorrow morning. He hung up and looked at us. We have 48 hours to get the sensors installed and tested. Then Seattle PD will have officers watching the house. The moment those sensors detect poison being prepared or used, they move in. We had the evidence of what they had done. Now we needed to catch them doing it again. There's one more thing, Garrett said. You need to go back home tonight, Audrey. Act normal. Act like you're considering signing the trust. Give them hope. The closer you get to signing, the more pressure they'll feel to move fast. We want them desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. You want me to live in that house for 3 more days while we set the trap? Yes. Knowing they're planning to kill me. Knowing we'll catch them before they can... Garrett corrected. You'll have sensors monitoring everything. Your phone will alert you to any chemical detection, and Seattle PD will be 5 minutes away the entire time. But yes, you need to sell it. You need to make them believe you're about to sign. I looked at Austin. He nodded slowly. I'll be there too. I'm not leaving you alone with him. Then we're set, Garrett said. Audrey goes home tonight. Austin builds the sensors tomorrow. We install them Saturday morning when Charles goes to his office, and then we wait. I drove home alone at 7 that evening. The house looked the same as always, suburban, comfortable, safe. A lie wrapped in siding and landscaping. Dad was in the living room when I walked in. He stood immediately, his face breaking into relieved concern. Audrey. He crossed the room and pulled me into a hug. I stiffened involuntarily, feeling his arms around me, smelling his cologne, the same cologne that had been in Eleanor's bedroom the morning she died. He felt it, the stiffness, and pulled back. Are you okay? You've been gone for 2 days. I was worried. I needed space, I said, to think, to process. One, of course. His voice was gentle, patient. Have you been able to think about the trust documents? I don't want to pressure you, but Eleanor would have wanted... I've been thinking about it, Dad. I met his eyes. About what Grandma would have wanted. About family. About moving forward. He waited, watching me. Maybe I should just sign, I said. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time to handle the estate properly and move on with our lives. For exactly 1 second, his eyes lit up. Pure excitement, pure triumph, pure greed, all of it flashing across his face before the mask slammed back down. 1 second. His eyes lit up for exactly 1 second before he remembered to look sad. 1 second was all I needed. There's no rush, sweetheart. He said, his voice returned to practiced gentleness. Take all the time you need. I know this is hard. Losing Grandma. All the legal complications. But I'm here for you. I'm your father. That's what matters. Thanks, Dad. He smiled. Are you hungry? I can make dinner. I already ate. I lied. I think I'm just going to go to bed early. Of course. Rest. We can talk more tomorrow. Charles walked me to the stairs, his hand gentle on my shoulder, the same hand that had poured poison into his mother's teapot, the same hand that had held a syringe while Julian told him what to do. The same hand that would try to kill me as soon as I signed those documents. I'm proud of you, Audrey, he said softly. This is the right decision. Grandma would be proud too. I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. I knew that in 48 hours Garrett would have the warrant. In 72 hours, Austin would install the sensors throughout this house, and then we'd wait for my father to try killing me. But first, Julian had to make his move. Julian made his move Friday morning. Dr. Julian Whitfield was sitting at our breakfast table when I came downstairs, and I knew the game had entered its final phase. He was 50 years old, trim and professional in expensive casual clothes, the kind of doctor who looked like he golfed on weekends and drove a German sedan. His medical bag sat beside his chair along with a small suitcase. Planning to stay a while, apparently. Dad stood when he saw me. Audrey, this is Dr. Whitfield, our family's counselor. He's here to make sure you're okay after everything with Grandma. Julian rose and extended his hand. His grip was firm, warm, professionally reassuring. "It's good to finally meet you properly, Audrey. Your father's told me so much about you over the years." I shook his hand and smiled. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Whitfield. Please call me Julian." He gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit. Have coffee. Your father was just telling me how you've been handling your grief." I poured myself coffee from the carafe on the table. My hand was perfectly steady. Julian watched me with the practiced eye of someone trained to notice tremors, hesitation, signs of instability. He would find none. "I know this is hard," Julian said, his voice gentle, modulated for maximum comfort. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Light pressure, professional concern. "Grief can affect judgment. It can make us question things, see patterns that aren't there, feel paranoid or unsafe. That's completely normal. I'm here to help you through this difficult time." I looked directly into his eyes and smiled politely. "Thank you, Dr. Whitfield. I appreciate that. It's good to know someone cares." Inside, I was remembering Fragment 3. His voice cold and clinical, cutting through Eleanor's pleading. "Give me the syringe, Charles." The sound of struggle. Eleanor's final gasp. This man had murdered my grandmother with medical precision. And now he sat at my breakfast table, touching my shoulder and talking about grief. Dr. Whitfield smiled at me. I smiled back. We both knew something the other wasn't saying. "I'd like to do a quick wellness check," Julian said. "Just to make sure you're handling the stress appropriately. Blood pressure, heart rate. Standard procedure for someone experiencing sudden family loss." "Of course," I said. "Whatever you think is necessary." He pulled a blood pressure cuff from his medical bag. As he wrapped it around my arm, I thought about how easy it would be for him to inject something. How much access a family doctor had. How much trust we'd given him over the years. The cuff tightened, released. 120/75. Julian said, making a note on a small pad. "Very good. Heart rate." He pressed 2 fingers to my wrist, counting silently. His fingers were cool, steady. The fingers of a man who'd held a syringe while my grandmother died. 68 beats per minute. Excellent. You're handling the stress remarkably well, Audrey. "I've always been resilient," I said. "I can see that." He packed his equipment away. "Your father mentioned you're considering signing the estate trust. That's a very mature decision. It shows you're thinking clearly about the future." "Family's important," I said, echoing Dad's words from last night. "Grandma would have wanted us to stay together." Dad smiled. Julian smiled. I smiled. A table full of smiles and lies. I excused myself after breakfast, saying I needed to run errands. Dad didn't question it. Julian gave me his business card, "Call anytime you need to talk," and told me he'd be checking in regularly over the next few days. I drove straight to the grocery store parking lot where Garrett was waiting. Austin was already there, leaning against Garrett's car. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Julian Whitfield showed up this morning," I said, "at the house. He's positioning himself as family counselor." "Smart," Garrett said. "If you have a breakdown, resist signing or try to leave, he's there with medical authority to intervene. They're tightening the circle." "Do we have the warrant?" Austin asked. Garrett nodded. Detective Sarah Cordova from Seattle PD Homicide reviewed the complete evidence package yesterday. Lab report showing the synthetic poison compound. All 3 hearing aid audio fragments. The micro SD video of Charles pouring powder into Eleanor's teapot. Eleanor's blood will, she's convinced. The warrant will be signed and ready in 48 hours. "Then we move," I said. "There's one requirement." Garrett's expression was serious. "Eleanor's evidence is strong. It proves pattern, premeditation, conspiracy. But for a murder charge to stick, especially against a respected doctor and a successful businessman, the DA needs to catch them committing a fresh crime. Eleanor's evidence shows what they did. We need to show what they're doing. On camera. In real time." "You need them to try killing me again," I said. "Yes. 48 hours. I had to keep them calm, keep them comfortable, and make them believe they had already won." Then let's give them a reason to, I said. I'll sign the trust tomorrow. I'll make it clear I'm committed. And then we wait. The sensors will be ready tonight, Austin said. I can install them tomorrow morning while Dad's at the office. 4 devices: kitchen, living room, study, and your bedroom. Any chemical compound in the air will detect it. Encrypted alerts straight to your phone. Seattle PD will have a tactical unit staged 2 blocks away, Garrett added. The moment those sensors detect poison being prepared or administered, they move. Less than 90 seconds response time. And if something goes wrong? Austin asked quietly. It won't, Garrett said. But his eyes told a different story. We were betting my life on technology and timing. One mistake, one miscalculation, and I'd end up like Eleanor, dead before anyone could help. Garrett handed me a burner phone. When the sensors detect something, you'll get an alert. Don't react. Don't run. Just let them think you don't know. The police need to catch them in the act. That means you have to let it happen almost to completion. I closed my fingers around the phone. The plastic was cold solid. Real. In 48 hours, we'd place the sensors throughout my childhood home. Then I'd sign the trust documents that would make me Charles's legal victim. And then I'd wait for the 2 men who claimed to love me, my father and my family doctor, to try poisoning me to death. The trap was set. Now I had to survive long enough to spring it. I didn't have to wait 48 hours. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard my father's voice through the study door, and the words that confirmed he planned to kill me in the morning. It was 11 at night. I'd gone to bed at 9, but sleep was impossible. My mouth was dry, my mind racing through tomorrow's plan. I'd gotten up for water, padding down the hallway in bare feet and pajamas. The study door was open a crack. Light spilled through, and with it, voices. Low, conspiratorial. I froze on the landing. She's going to sign tomorrow. Dad's voice, quiet but confident. I can feel it. You said that 3 days ago. Julian's voice skeptical. 3 days ago, she was still processing. Now she's ready. You saw her today, calm, accepting, cooperative. She's made peace with it. A pause. The sound of liquid being poured. Whiskey, probably. And after that? Julian asked. My hand gripped the banister. Same as before, Dad said. Natural causes. The compound works fast at her dosage level. 30 minutes, maybe less. Anaphylactic response. You certify cause of death as accidental allergen exposure. We file the trust with probate before anyone can question it. You have everything ready. The documents are prepared. All she has to do is sign. I meant the compound. Do you have it? I thought you had it. A sharp exhale. Charles, I brought it. It's in my medical bag. But you're the one who has to. I know what I have to do. Silence for a moment. Then the sound of glass being placed on wood, heavy, final. Make it fast this time, Julian said. His voice was cold, clinical, the same voice from Fragment 3. Your mother took ours. It was unpleasant. She wouldn't drink enough. Kept stopping to talk, to plead. This time I'll put it directly in her coffee. She drinks the whole cup every morning. Tomorrow. They were going to do it tomorrow, which meant I had to move first. I backed up the stairs step by careful step until I reached the second-floor hallway. Then I walked silently to my bedroom and closed the door. My hands weren't shaking. My heart was beating steady and slow. This wasn't panic. This was clarity. I pulled the burner phone from under my pillow and typed rapidly. To Austin, overheard them. Tomorrow morning. They have the compound ready. Execute 8 a.m. To Garrett, timeline accelerated. They move tomorrow after I sign. Need sensors installed before breakfast. Confirm warrant status. The responses came within minutes. Austin, I'm ready. Divide and isolate at 8 a.m. sharp. Sensors install during window. You good? Garrett, warrant signed 6 p.m. tonight. SWAT on standby. Sensors critical, they need real-time detection for admissible evidence. Timing has to be exact. I typed, understood. What's the play? Garrett's response was detailed, clinical. At 8 a.m., Austin would deliver fake documents to the house, a certified letter for Charles, claiming urgent bank meeting regarding Eleanor's accounts. While Charles was out a second envelope for Julian Medical Board summons regarding his psychiatric evaluation of me, requiring immediate phone consultation. 45 minutes for Charles, 30 for Julian. Overlap of 20 minutes when both would be occupied. In those 20 minutes, Austin would install 4 IoT sensors: kitchen, living room, study, and my bedroom. Environmental monitoring disguised as smart plugs. Any chemical compound in the air, the sensors would detect it and alert my phone with encrypted messages. Then, while Charles and Julian were distracted, I'd swap the real trust documents for the fakes Arthur had prepared: identical formatting, identical signatures, but legally worthless. When I signed tomorrow, I'd be signing meaningless paper. And when Charles tried to poison me afterward, the sensors would catch it. SWAT would breach within 90 seconds. The compound would be seized as evidence, and both men would be arrested for attempted murder with all of Eleanor's evidence backing the charges. The plan was elegant, precise, and completely dependent on timing. I lay in the same bed where Grandma used to read me stories, in the house where she fought her last battle alone. Tomorrow, I would walk into the same room as the men who killed her. I would smile at them. I would sign their fake documents. And I would end this. I stared at the ceiling where her drawings used to hang, crayon pictures I'd made when I was 5, 6, 7. Pictures of houses and families and safety. She'd kept them up until I moved out at 18, then carefully stored them away. This room had been my sanctuary, then my prison. Now it would be my battlefield. My phone buzzed. Austin, Dad just walked past my room, going to bed. Julian, too. They think they've already won. I typed back, let them think that. Tomorrow morning, we prove them wrong. Garrett, everyone's in position. Sensors tested and ready. Detective Cordova has tactical units staged 2 blocks away. You're the linchpin. If you can't maintain composure, I can. Eleanor did it for 6 months while dying. I can do it for 6 hours while armed. Garrett. Good. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be the longest day of your life. I set the burner phone on my nightstand and stared at the ceiling until dawn broke through the curtains. Somewhere downstairs, Charles and Julian slept peacefully in the guest room, believing tomorrow they'd watch me sign away my life and then die of natural causes within the hour. They had no idea the sensors would go in at 8 a.m., no idea the warrant was already signed, and SWAT was 2 blocks away with tactical gear. No idea that I'd been texting my brother and a private investigator all night coordinating the trap that would end them. Most of all, they had no idea that the daughter and the grandmother had been playing a longer game than they ever imagined. Eleanor had fought for 6 months documenting every poisoning, every threat, every conspiracy. She'd built the evidence. She'd recruited the team. She'd planned the trap. All I had to do was walk into it and not die. Tomorrow morning, the trap would spring or I would die trying. Morning came. I walked into the kitchen at 7 wearing the mask of a daughter who had decided to surrender. I'd spent an hour in the bathroom perfecting the look. Red-rimmed eyes from rubbing them with cold water. Hair pulled back messily. No makeup. Shoulders slumped just enough to suggest defeat without overdoing it. I wore the same pajamas I'd slept in or pretended to sleep in, making it clear I'd barely rested. Dad and Julian were already at the kitchen table. Coffee was brewing. The trust documents were spread out in neat rows, tabs marking every signature line. Julian's medical suitcase sat beside his chair, black leather with brass latches. Inside that case was the compound that had killed Eleanor. The compound designed to kill me. Both men looked up when I entered. I saw the calculation in their eyes, assessing, measuring, hoping. I made my decision, I said. My voice came out tired, defeated. Perfect. I want to sign today. Let's just get it done. The glance they exchanged lasted less than a second. Victory flashed across both faces before the masks slammed back into place. Professional concern for Dad. Medical compassion for Julian. Are you sure, sweetheart? Dad stood crossing to me. His hand found my shoulder warm and gentle. The same hand that had poured poison into his mother's teapot. There's no rush. You can take more time if you need it. I don't need more time, I said, looking up at him. I've thought about it all night. You're right. Grandma would have wanted this. Family should stay together. Julian stood as well, his professional mask perfect. This is a very mature decision, Audrey. It shows real emotional growth. I'm proud of you. He gestured to the chair at the table. I sat. Dad poured coffee from the carafe, the liquid dark and steaming. He placed the cup in front of me with a smile. I'm proud of you, sweetheart, he said. This is the right thing. I looked at the coffee cup Dad had poured. Steam rose from it, carrying the scent of morning normalcy, rich, bitter, comforting. The kind of coffee he made on weekend mornings when I was growing up. The kind I used to love. I didn't touch it. Can we go through it one more time? I asked, pulling the documents toward me. I want to understand every clause before I sign. Of course, Julian said smoothly, settling into his chair. His eyes flicked briefly to the medical suitcase beside him. Checking. Confirming it was there. Ready. For the next hour, we reviewed the trust line by line. I asked questions. I requested clarifications. I played the role of dutiful daughter trying to understand complicated legal language. All the while, my coffee sat untouched, growing cold. At 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Text from Austin. Package delivered. I reached into my robe pocket and pulled out an envelope. Official looking, with the Seattle First National Bank logo printed in the corner. I'd made it myself yesterday at a print shop using Eleanor's account information from her files. Dad, this came in the mail this morning, I said, sliding it across the table. I almost forgot. It looks important. Charles picked it up, frowning. He tore it open and pulled out the letter inside. I watched his face as he read. The color drained from his cheeks. His hands started shaking. What is it? Julian asked. Dad's voice was hollow. Eleanor's main savings account. $847,000 in cash. They're saying there are estate processing irregularities. The account's been frozen. He looked up at me, then at Julian. They need the primary heir's signature in person, within 45 minutes, or the entire account goes into permanent tax audit hold. I'd calculated this carefully. Dad was drowning in gambling debts. I'd found the collection notices in his office when I was searching for the trust documents last week. Nearly $1 million in debts to bookies and casinos. He needed Eleanor's money desperately. He couldn't afford to lose a single dollar to taxes or audits. 45 minutes. Dad checked his watch, panic rising in his voice. That's impossible. The bank is 20 minutes if you speed, I said quietly. You could make it. He stared at the letter. At me. At Julian. The choice was obvious. $800,000 or sitting here watching me review legal documents. I have to go, he said, standing abruptly. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. I'll be back in an hour. We can finish the signing then. Of course, Dad, I said calmly. Take care. The bank closes at 9 on Saturdays. You should hurry. He was already moving toward the garage. Julian, you stay with her. Make sure she's comfortable. Go through the documents. I'll sign as trustee when I get back. Drive safe, Dad, I called after him. The garage door opened. The car engine roared to life. Tires screeched on concrete as he reversed too fast, then accelerated down the driveway. I walked to the living room window and watched his car disappear down our suburban street. His car hadn't even turned the corner before I was already moving. The garage door closed automatically. The sound of his engine faded into the distance of morning traffic. I stood at the window and watched until I couldn't see his taillights anymore. 45 minutes. That's all Austin needed to install the 4 sensors while Charles sat in a bank lobby waiting to speak with a manager who didn't exist about an account irregularity that wasn't real. I turned back toward the kitchen where Julian Whitfield waited with the trust documents spread across the table and his medical suitcase sitting beside his chair. Inside that case was the compound that had murdered my grandmother. The compound he'd used while telling my father exactly what to do. He had no idea that in 43 minutes, my house would have 4 sensors recording every chemical anomaly in real time. Sensors that would feed directly to my phone. Sensors that would trigger a SWAT response the moment they detected poison. Now I had to isolate Julian. 5 minutes after Charles left, Julian's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I watched his face drain of color as he read the message that would give Austin exactly 20 minutes. Julian picked up the phone, his professional mask cracking. His eyes moved rapidly across the screen, reading something that made his jaw tighten. Then he tapped the screen and held it to his ear. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. He looked at me, then back at the phone. His free hand moved unconsciously toward his medical suitcase. "Is everything all right?" I asked, keeping my voice concerned. "Innocent." He stopped reading the message again. "I have to make a call. Excuse me." He walked into the living room, phone pressed to his ear. I could hear him leaving voicemail messages, his voice tight with controlled panic. When he came back, his face was pale. "Audrey, something urgent came up at the hospital." "Well, not the hospital exactly. The medical commission. I have to go." "Is it serious?" I asked. "There's been some irregularities. Questions about prescriptions I've written. I need to attend an emergency board meeting at Swedish Medical Center." He checked his watch. 9:15. I have just enough time. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. Then his hand moved toward the medical suitcase. My heart stopped. If he took that case, if he took the compound with him, there would be no evidence, no proof. The sensors Austin was about to install would detect nothing because the poison would be gone. Julian's fingers closed around the handle. "I'll need my credentials," he muttered, lifting the case. Then he stopped. Set it back down. "Actually, no," he said almost to himself. "I'll leave this here. No need to bring medical equipment to a board meeting. Makes me look defensive." He looked at me. "I'll be back by 10. We can finish the documents then. Your father should be back by then, too." "Of course," I said. "Take care, Dr. Whitfield. I hope everything's okay." He managed a strained smile. "Just a misunderstanding, I'm sure. Bureaucratic nonsense." The door closed behind him. I heard his car start. The engine faded down the street. The bag sat on my kitchen floor. I had 20 minutes. I pulled out the burner phone and texted Austin. "Both clear. 20-minute window, go." Response came in seconds. "On my way." I unlocked the back door and stood at the kitchen window watching. 60 seconds later, Austin appeared from the neighbor's yard, moving quickly but not running. He used the spare key I'd hidden under the back step and slipped inside. 20 minutes, I whispered. 4 sensors, kitchen, living room, hallway. Go. He was already moving. He pulled a backpack from his shoulder and started unpacking devices that looked exactly like standard smart plugs, white plastic standard 2-prong outlets. You'd never look twice at them. But these were anything but standard. Austin plugged the first one into the outlet beside the refrigerator. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few commands. My burner phone vibrated in my pocket. Notification sensor 1 connected. Monitoring active. He moved to the outlet near the stove. Another sensor. Another notification. Sensor 2 connected. Kitchen complete. Living room, I whispered. Austin moved fast but carefully. He climbed on a chair to reach the outlet in the upper corner near the bookshelf, the one we never used because it was too high. Perfect position for detecting airborne compounds. Sensor 3 connected. Hallway, first floor by the bathroom. He was already heading there. I watched from the kitchen, my heart pounding, checking my watch. 12 minutes gone. 8 minutes left. Sensor 4 connected. All systems active. My phone displayed a simple interface now. 4 green dots, each labeled kitchen, 1 kitchen, 2, living room, hallway. Below them, chemical baseline normal, monitoring in progress. The moment any of those sensors detected unusual compounds in the air, particularly the synthetic poison Julian and Charles had used, my phone would alert. And the data would stream directly to Garrett's laptop and to Seattle PD's evidence database. Austin was packing his equipment when my burner phone vibrated. Different pattern. Urgent. Text from Garrett. Julian's GPS. Turning onto your street. Get Austin out now. My blood went cold. Austin, he's coming back, go. Austin looked up, eyes wide. He grabbed his backpack laptop and headed for the back door. Wait, I hissed. The chair in the living room, put it back. He ran back, repositioned the chair exactly where it had been. Then he was at the back door, slipping through, pulling it closed behind him. I locked it, checked the kitchen. Everything looked normal. The smart plugs blended perfectly with the outlets. You wouldn't notice them unless you were specifically looking. I sat down at the kitchen table and picked up the trust documents. My hands were steady as I pretended to read them. Footsteps on the front walk. A key in the lock. Austin's footsteps faded through the back door exactly as Julian's key turned in the front lock. 40 seconds. That was all the margin we had. The door opened. Julian walked in carrying a coffee cup from a drive-thru. Sorry about that, he said, smiling at me. His color had returned. The panic was gone. False alarm. The board meeting's been rescheduled for next week. Someone made an administrative error. He set his coffee on the table and sat down across from me. So, he said, pulling the trust documents toward him. Shall we continue? I know you want to get this done before your father returns. Sure, I said. He smiled. I smiled back. He had no idea that while he was gone, my house had become a surveillance net. 4 sensors hidden in plain sight. 4 locations monitoring the air constantly. All connected to my phone. All streaming data to law enforcement. All waiting to catch him poisoning me. Now I just had to make him try. The sensors were in place. Now I needed to give Charles and Julian a reason to use the poison while the sensors watched. Saturday night, 9 o'clock. Charles and Julian were 3 rooms away in the living room watching a baseball game, volume high enough to cover any sound I might make. The office door didn't creak. I'd oiled the hinges that afternoon while they were both out. Arthur's duplicate documents were in my purse, identical to the originals down to the paperweight, the watermark, even the notary stamp. This was the swap that would turn their weapon into nothing. I moved quickly but carefully. The office smelled like Dad's cologne and old leather. His desk was walnut expensive, organized. I knew exactly where he kept the trust documents, second drawer from the bottom manila folder labeled Estate in his careful handwriting. The drawer slid open silently. There it was. I pulled out the folder and spread the documents on the desk. Real signatures. Real notarization. Real legal language that would give Charles everything if I signed and died. I pulled Arthur's duplicates from my purse. Identical. Perfect forgeries, except they weren't forgeries at all. They were real legal documents that Arthur had filed with the court using altered beneficiary information. The signatures looked identical because Arthur had traced them from originals Eleanor had provided, but the legal effect was nothing. Charles would be signing documents that transferred exactly $0 to exactly nobody. I photographed every page of the originals with my phone. Evidence. Then I placed Arthur's duplicates in the exact same position, same orientation, same slight curl at the corner where Charles had dog-eared page 7. From the living room, the baseball game erupted in cheers. A home run, probably. I closed the drawer and walked out of the office. Phase 1 complete. Sunday morning, 8 o'clock. I came downstairs in pajamas and found Charles in the kitchen. Julian had left an hour earlier, some excuse about a patient emergency. It was just the 2 of us. Good morning, sweetheart, Dad said. He was holding a teacup, steam rising from it. I made you Grandma's special herbal blend, the one she used to make for you when you were little. He placed the cup in front of me on the kitchen table. The liquid was amber fragrant. It smelled like chamomile and honey and childhood mornings. It smelled like love. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out casually as if checking a text message. The screen displayed a single alert. Sensor 2, kitchen chemical anomaly, detected 94% confidence, alkaloid profile match data, streaming to SPD. The sensors were working. The compound was in the tea. Seattle Police Department was receiving real-time evidence that my father had just poisoned me. I looked up at Charles. He was watching me expectantly, that warm dad smile on his face. The smile I'd trusted my whole life. "Drink up," he said gently. "Long day ahead of us." I set the cup down carefully. "Let me sign those papers first," I said. "I want everything settled before I relax with this tea." His smile tightened. Just for a moment. A flicker of impatience before the mask returned. "Of course," he said. "The documents are ready in my office. Let's take care of that now." Before I walk into that office and sign those papers, comment A, if you think I should confront him now, or B, if I should keep playing along. Add one reason why. Because this next moment determines everything. Note some details ahead are dramatized to convey the emotional truth. I followed him to the office. He spread the documents across his desk, Arthur's worthless duplicates, though he had no idea. He thought he was watching me sign away my life. "Read carefully," he said, sliding the papers toward me. "I want you to understand what you're agreeing to." I read each page slowly, performing due diligence, playing the role of careful daughter, making sure she understood her inheritance. Every word I read was legally meaningless. Arthur had made sure of that. These documents would transfer nothing, protect. Nothing mean, nothing in any court of law. I signed in 4 places. My signature looked real because it was real. But the document beneath it was worthless. Charles countersigned as witness. His hand was steady. His smile was genuine now, the smile of a man who thinks he's won. "There," he said, stacking the pages neatly. "All done." Then he looked at me, and something in his expression shifted. The mask dropped. Just for a moment. Just long enough for me to see the truth underneath. "You just signed away Grandma's house and investments," he said. His voice was different now, colder. "Well, technically you signed meaningless paper. The real transfer happens when you drink that tea, and I file the death certificate. But you won't know that. You'll think you did the right thing. Family first, right?" He actually laughed. I smiled back at him. Then I should finish my tea. "You should," he said. We walked back to the kitchen together. The tea was still there, still steaming, still poisoned, still waiting. Charles followed 3 steps behind me, confident, victorious. I picked up the cup. "To Grandma Eleanor," I said, raising it to my lips. Charles smiled. I smiled back. Then I set it down untouched. "Actually, I'm not thirsty," I said, "but thank you for the thought." I walked to my room before he could respond. Behind me, I heard him standing there in the kitchen. Silent, calculating. I had 48 hours until the warrant. 48 hours to act normal. 48 hours to let him think I suspected nothing. 48 hours to let him believe that the tea was the only thing standing between him and Eleanor's money. And every one of those hours the censors would be watching, waiting, recording. All I had to do was survive long enough for the trap to close. The hours crawled by. I spent Sunday morning and afternoon in my room pretending to rest while actually coordinating final details with Garrett via encrypted texts. My phone rang at 3 p.m. Garrett's number, the call I'd been waiting 20 years to receive. I walked out to my car in the driveway, got in, and drove to the grocery store parking lot 2 blocks away before answering. "It's done," Garrett said. No preamble. "Judge signed the warrant at noon." I closed my eyes. Everything. Lab reports showing the synthetic compound, 3 hearing aid audio fragments proving conspiracy, micro SD video of Charles poisoning Eleanor's teapot, the blood will, and this morning's IoT sensor logs showing 94% confidence chemical anomaly in your tea. Seattle PD has enough evidence to arrest both of them for Eleanor's murder and attempted murder of you. SWAT. Staged and ready. Detective Cordova's coordinating. She wants to know, when do you want them to move? I stared through the windshield at the ordinary Sunday afternoon. Families loading groceries, kids eating ice cream, normal people living normal lives. "Tomorrow morning," I said. 7 a.m. I want them to think they've won completely before it falls apart. "Confirmed. 7 a.m. breach simultaneous arrest of Charles Russell and Julian Whitfield. There was a pause. Then Garrett's voice came back quieter. Audrey, there's something you should know. Your grandmother, she contacted me 6 months ago. March. She was still strong then. Still healthy. She came to my office and laid out the entire operation, the hearing aid recordings, the evidence gathering, the legal strategy. She planned all of this while she was still well enough to fight. I couldn't speak. She knew what they were going to do before they started doing it, Garrett continued. And she spent 6 months building the trap that would catch them. While the poison was destroying her body, she was constructing their prison. She'd been dying and still built the trap that would catch them. 6 months of planning while poison destroyed her body. 6 months of wearing that hearing aid every day, recording every conversation, gathering every piece of evidence. She'd known she was dying. She'd known she couldn't save herself. But she'd made damn sure she could save us. I'll be there tomorrow, Garrett said. 7 a.m. It ends tomorrow. I drove home. Charles was in the kitchen making dinner. He smiled when I walked in. There you are, he said. I was getting worried. Where'd you go? Just needed to drive around and think, I said. Clear my head. Of course. He stirred something on the stove. Julian's staying for dinner. I thought we could all watch a movie tonight. Family time. Family time. The night before SWAT kicked down the door and arrested him for murder. That sounds nice, I said. Dinner was lasagna. Julian sat across from me, professional and polite. Charles poured wine. I drank water. Nobody commented. Afterward, we moved to the living room. Charles turned on the TV and scrolled through options before settling on some comedy I'd never heard of. Julian made tea. I noticed he didn't offer me any this time. Subtle wariness. He'd noticed I refused the poisoned tea this morning. My phone rang. Austin's name on the screen. Hey, I answered, walking toward the hallway for privacy. Just checking in, Austin said. His voice was carefully casual. How are you feeling? Everything okay? Coded language. Is the plan still on? Yeah, I said. Everything's ready for tomorrow morning. The system's running perfectly. A pause. Then, good. I'll talk to you tomorrow then. Early. Early, I confirmed. I hung up and returned to the living room. Charles patted the couch beside him. Come sit with us, he said. It's been a stressful week. Let's just relax together. How do you sit on a couch with 2 men who tried to murder you, smiling like everything's normal when you know their freedom ends at sunrise? You remember that your grandmother did it for 6 months. You remember that she sat at dinner tables and holiday gatherings and smiled at the son who was poisoning her. You remember that she was stronger than you ever imagined. And you sit down. The movie played. I don't remember what it was about. Charles laughed at the jokes. Julian sipped his tea. The living room was warm, comfortable, safe-looking. A perfect suburban evening. A perfect lie. This is nice, Charles said during a commercial break. He looked at me with genuine warmth, or something that looked like it. Family is everything, isn't it? I'm glad we're all together tonight. After everything with Mom, with the estate, with all the stress, I'm glad we can just be here. Be family. I smiled at him. Me too, Dad. Julian checked his watch. I should probably head out soon. Early day tomorrow. Stay for the end of the movie, Charles said. It's only another 20 minutes. Julian stayed. At 9 o'clock I stood and stretched. I'm exhausted, I said. I think I'm going to turn in early. Sleep well, sweetheart, Dad said. Good night, Audrey, Julian added. I climbed the stairs to my room. Behind me, I heard them settling back into the couch, heard the TV volume increase slightly. They were relaxed, confident, believing they'd won. I closed my door and set my alarm for 6:45 a.m. 10 hours until the raid. 10 hours until Seattle SWAT breached the front door with a warrant signed by a King County judge. 10 hours until Detective Cordova read them their rights, while officers secured the house and seized Julian's medical bag with its synthetic poison compound. 10 hours until they learned that the grandmother they'd murdered had built a trap so perfect, so complete, that they'd walked into it smiling. I lay in bed and listened to the sounds of the house. TV murmur from downstairs. Eventually, Julian's car starting and pulling away. Dad's footsteps on the stairs heading to his room. The house settling into night. Tomorrow morning would bring SWAT chemical evidence and the end of their freedom. Tonight, I just had to sleep. The kitchen clock read 7 a.m. when I walked in and saw the glass of water waiting on the counter, clear, innocent, 97% poisoned. Charles stood by the sink, dressed in his usual Monday suit tie already knotted. The morning light caught the side of his face, making him look almost paternal. Almost. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said, gesturing to the glass. "Thought you might want something before we head out. Water today, figured you weren't in the mood for tea after yesterday." He'd learned. That was the entry twist. I hadn't expected Charles adapting his method after I'd refused the chamomile tea yesterday afternoon. Water was harder to refuse. More innocent. More necessary. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, glanced at the screen. The encrypted network of environmental sensors Austin had deployed yesterday morning flashed its alert: chemical anomaly detected. Confidence, 97%. Sensor kitchen water 03. Uploading comprehensive data. Below that, estimated upload time 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I needed to stall for 2 minutes, while Eleanor's sensors transmitted the complete chemical signature, the concentration levels, the timestamp proof that would seal Charles's fate. "You look tired," Julian said from the doorway. I hadn't heard him come in. He stood there in khakis and a pressed shirt, doctor's bag in hand, ready to play his role, ready to confirm my death as a tragic accident just like he'd done for Eleanor. "Didn't sleep well," I said, which was true. I'd set my alarm for 6:45 a.m., had spent the night running through every scenario where this could go wrong, where the sensors could fail, where Garrett's SWAT team could be delayed, where I'd actually have to drink the poison. "All the more reason to hydrate," Charles said, sliding the glass closer. "Drink up, sweetheart. Long day ahead of us." The water caught the light. Clear, perfect, deadly. How many times had Eleanor stared at a glass just like this? How many mornings had she woken up feeling wrong, her body slowly breaking down from accumulated doses, while Charles played the concerned son and Julian played the trusted physician? 6 months. That's how long Eleanor had suspected. 6 months of pretending she didn't know, of installing sensors and cameras and recording devices while her own son poisoned her morning tea. 6 months of gathering evidence while her body failed. I thought about that timeline often, how much courage it took to keep drinking the tea, to keep playing the role of the trusting mother, to sacrifice her own health for the proof that would save me. I was thinking about Eleanor this morning. I said, pulling out a chair. The clock read 7:01 a.m. 1 more minute. About the stories she used to tell at breakfast. Charles's expression softened, or appeared to. She did love her stories. "Remember the one about the robin?" I kept my voice steady, conversational. "The robin that kept flying into the window every morning trying to get inside." She said it took her weeks to realize the bird was attacking its own reflection. "I remember," Charles said. His hand moved toward the glass, ready to push it closer again. "She said the robin couldn't tell the difference between itself and the enemy." I continued. "That sometimes the threat we're fighting is just our own reflection distorted by the glass." Julian shifted by the door. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. Charles seeing Eleanor's wealth as his own reflection, his birthright something being kept from him by the thin barrier of her continued existence. But Eleanor had been smarter than any robin. She'd recognized the real threat. She'd seen past the distortion. My phone vibrated again. I glanced down. Data upload complete. Comprehensive chemical signature transmitted. GPS coordinates confirmed. Timestamp verified. Everything Garrett needed. Everything Eleanor had planned for. The clock read 7:02 a.m. "You're right," I said, meeting Charles's eyes. "Long day ahead. I should hydrate." I reached for the glass. Charles smiled. Then I set my phone face up on the table between us, screen dark. The exit twist, that simple gesture, was the prearranged signal. Phone face up meant the evidence was uploaded, the target was confirmed, the green light was given. 2 blocks away, Garrett would be seeing the GPS confirmation. The chemical data, the final piece of proof that Charles Russell had attempted to murder his daughter in the same kitchen where he'd perfected his technique on his mother. 90 seconds until breach. That was the protocol. 90 seconds from signal to entry, enough time to confirm positions to ready the team to coordinate the simultaneous arrest of both Charles Russell and Dr. Julian Whitfield. I could wait 90 seconds. Actually, I said, my hand still on the glass, Eleanor told me something else about that robin. Want to know what finally stopped it from attacking the window? Charles's smile faltered. Something in my voice had changed. Something in the way I held the glass without drinking in, the way my phone sat between us like a third presence at the table. What stopped it? He asked. I smiled back. Someone opened the window. Let the birds see what was really inside. Julian's hand tightened on his medical bag. Charles's eyes flicked to the glass to my phone to the front door. How much loyalty did Julian have, I wondered, enough to run, enough to stay and fight? Or would he stand there frozen when the door came down, when Eleanor's 6-month plan finally reached its conclusion? The kitchen clock ticked. 7:03 a.m. 60 seconds. Audrey, Charles said slowly. What's going on? Nothing, Dad. The word tasted like poison. Just remembering Eleanor's stories. Just thinking about robins and reflections and windows that finally open. I kept my hand on the glass, kept my eyes on his face, kept breathing through the seconds. 30 seconds. 20. 10. The phone sat face up between us. Screen dark, but signal transmitted. Charles leaned forward. Julian's hand moved toward the glass, ready to push it closer. 2 blocks away, Garrett was giving the green light. In 90 seconds, the front door would come down. I stood up from the table, picked up the TV remote, and walked to the living room. Behind me, Charles's chair scraped. Audrey, Dad, I want to show you something Grandma left for me, I said. The 90 seconds were ticking down. 50 left. Maybe 40. I needed him to see it before the door came down. The 65-inch TV flickered to life. I'd paired my phone yesterday, queued up the IoT monitoring app Eleanor had hidden in the home automation system. Julian appeared in the doorway. What are you doing? I tapped the screen. Sensor network archive timestamp 7:02 a.m. The video began to play. High resolution. Color. Perfect angle from the smoke detector camera above the kitchen counter. Charles stood by the sink alone. He glanced toward the stairs, listening. Then he reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a small glass bottle. Clear liquid. He unscrewed the cap, tilted it over the water glass on the counter, and poured. 4 drops. 5. His face was completely visible. No shadow. No question. He screwed the cap back on, slipped the bottle into his jacket, stepped away. The water sat there, clear and poisoned. I wanted him to see this before SWAT came through that door. I wanted him to know that Eleanor had won, that 20 years of planning had culminated in this moment that he'd lost before the handcuffs even touched his wrists. Where did you? Charles started. Turn it off, Julian said sharp. Turn it off right now. I didn't move. On screen, I walked into the kitchen. Charles smiled at me. Drink up, sweetheart. Long day ahead of us. I watched myself refuse, watched myself stall with Eleanor's Robin story, watched the clock tick from 7 o'clock to 7:02 a.m. while the sensors uploaded their data. Charles moved toward me. 3 strides, hand reaching for the remote. The front door exploded inward. Saddle police search warrant, hands where we can see them. Black tactical gear, helmets, rifles. The SWAT team poured through the front entrance, boots pounding on hardwood, voices overlapping in coordinated assault. The back door burst open simultaneously. More officers. Julian spun toward the kitchen exit and found himself facing 3 barrels. Down, get down now. Charles's hand never reached me. Two officers hit him from the side, driving him to the floor. His face smashed into the carpet. Hands yanked his arms behind his back. Julian tried to speak. "I'm a doctor. You can't, this is illegal." Down on the ground, they took him down beside Charles. Face down. Arms wrenched back. The click of handcuffs impossibly loud in the sudden silence. 8 seconds. Door breach to both men subdued, cuffed, neutralized. His face on that screen, clear, undeniable, guilty. The contrast hit me, the silent video still playing above, and the violent present below, Charles on screen carefully poisoning my water, and Charles on the floor with a tactical boot on his back. "Clear!" someone shouted from upstairs. "Kitchen clear. Basement clear." Detective Sarah Cordova walked through the front door, shield displayed, eyes scanning until they found me. "Audrey Russell, you're safe now. We have everything." I nodded. Couldn't speak. The remote was still in my hand. On the TV screen, the video had looped. Charles pouring poison. 4 drops. 5. His face perfectly visible. Evidence team Cordova called over her shoulder. "Kitchen water glass is priority 1. Handle it like nitro." 2 officers in gloves moved past me toward the kitchen. Julian was screaming now, face pressed into the floor. "This is harassment. I'll have your badges. I have patients waiting. I'm a licensed physician." The officer holding him down didn't respond. Just kept the pressure steady, kept Julian's wrists locked behind his back. Charles wasn't screaming. He'd gone silent the moment they'd taken him down. But his head was turned toward me, eyes locked on my face. How much did he understand? How much had he figured out in the last 2 minutes? Did he know about Eleanor's 20-year plan, about Austin's role, about Detective Cordova's parallel investigation? Or did he just know that he'd lost, that his daughter had beaten him? The back door crashed open again. Austin came running through, eyes wild. "Audrey!" He found me standing in the middle of the chaos, SWAT officers securing the scene, evidence techs photographing everything, Charles and Julian face down on the floor, and he crossed the room in 4 strides and pulled me into his arms. I didn't push him away. Didn't tell him to let go. Didn't remind him that I'd spent 20 years building walls that no one could breach. I let him hold me. 20 years of planning, 6 months of Eleanor's dying work, 7 days of evidence collection, all landing in 8 seconds of handcuffs clicking shut. Austin was saying something against my hair, words I couldn't quite hear over the noise of officers calling clearances and confirmations. Something about being sorry, about Eleanor and justice and Mom. Over his shoulder, I could see Dad's face, still watching me, still silent. What was he thinking? Was he running through his mistakes? The sensors, he'd never checked the hearing aid, he'd never questioned the daughter he'd underestimated. Or was he just seeing me clearly for the first time, not as the obedient child, not as the next victim, but as Eleanor Russell's granddaughter? "Charles Russell," Cordova was saying, crouching beside him with a card in her hand. "Julian Whitfield, you are both under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and first-degree murder in the death of Eleanor Russell. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The Miranda rights continued. Standard, procedural, inevitable. Austin's grip tightened. "You're okay," he whispered. "You're okay now." I wasn't sure if he was telling me or himself. The TV was still playing the loop. Charles pouring poison, his face clear, undeniable. Austin held me, and I didn't tell him to let go. Over his shoulder, I could see Dad face down on the floor, wrists cuffed behind his back, eyes still on me. Detective Cordova was reading them their rights. She had 147 hours of recordings to play for them. They lifted him to his feet, and he turned toward me, handcuffs gleaming, face wet. Austin's arms were still around me, but I stepped back, needing to see this clearly. 2 officers flanked Charles, hands on his arms, ready to guide him through the front door to the waiting police car. Julian was already being loaded into a second vehicle, still screaming about his medical license and illegal searches. But Charles wasn't screaming. He was looking at me. "Audrey," he said, and his voice broke. The officers paused, giving him 1 moment. Standard procedure before transport, let them speak. if they want to let them dig the hole deeper. Audrey, I'm your father. Blood. You know what they'll do to me in there, please. I made mistakes, but I'm still your dad. The entry twist hit me, then he was still trying to manipulate me. Even now, handcuffed and caught with IoT footage showing him pouring poison and SWAT officers on either side, he believed he could control me through emotion, through memory, through the word dad. And part of me wanted to respond to it. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike in the driveway where the police car now sat. I was 7. He'd held the back of the seat running beside me, letting go when I found my balance. When I looked back and realized he wasn't holding on anymore, I'd been terrified and thrilled at once. I remembered him bringing flowers to the hospital when I had appendix surgery at 14. White roses. He'd sat beside my bed for 6 hours, held my hand through the pain, told me stories about Mom when she was young. I remembered good things, real things. Memory is cruel. It preserves the good with the bad. But justice doesn't care about bike rides 30 years ago. The man who tried to kill both his children in the same week to collect $4.2 million doesn't get to use the word dad, I said. Charles's face changed. The pleading expression cracked, and underneath it I saw something else. Anger. Calculation. The realization that this tool, emotional manipulation, was finally broken. You'll regret this, he said quietly. When you're older. When you understand what family actually means? When you realize what you've thrown away? Move him, one of the officers said. They guided him toward the door. I watched him go, watched his expensive suit wrinkle against the pressure of hands on his arms, watched the morning light catch the handcuffs as he stepped over the threshold. The police car door opened. They placed a hand on his head, guiding him into the back seat. Standard procedure, protect the prisoner. The door closed with a solid thunk. I turned away before the car pulled out of the driveway. I didn't need to see him leave. Didn't need that final image. Austin was standing beside me, close but not touching, giving me space to process. Detective Cordova approached from the living room, evidence kit in hand. Audrey, we need to document everything for the chain of custody. The hearing aid specifically. Where is it now? I reached into my pocket. My fingers found the small device warm from being pressed against my leg. Eleanor's hearing aid. The one she'd worn every day for the last 6 months of her life. The one Charles and Julian had dismissed as an old woman's disability aid, the one that had captured everything. I held it up. Beige plastic curved to fit behind an ear, smaller than a walnut. Unremarkable. Invisible. The most powerful weapon Eleanor had ever owned. My grandmother wore this every day for the last 6 months. I said, setting it carefully on the evidence bag Cordova had spread on the living room table. She recorded everything. Cordova leaned in, examining it without touching. 147 hours of audio according to the file Detective Morris pulled from the cloud backup. That's comprehensive, I finished. Eleanor didn't miss much. Her hearing was perfect. She wore this specifically to record. Dad and Julian never questioned it. They saw an elderly woman with a hearing aid and assumed exactly what she wanted them to assume. She did all this herself. Cordova asked, her voice careful. A dying woman in her 70s. She couldn't fight them physically, I said. The words came easier than I expected. Her body was failing. The poison was working. She knew she had maybe 6 months left, maybe less. So she did the only thing she could. She made sure the truth would outlast her. Austin made a sound beside me. Not quite a sob. Not quite a laugh. Something caught between grief and admiration. They thought she was deaf to the world. She was recording it. The pattern interrupt landed perfectly, the reversal of perception, the understanding that Eleanor's apparent weakness had been her greatest strength. Charles and Julian had seen an old woman with failing health and a disability device. They'd never imagined she was documenting her own murder. She was brilliant, Cordova said softly. I've been a detective for 19 years. I've never seen evidence this thorough from a civilian victim. Most people don't even realize they're being poisoned until it's too late. Your grandmother understood the method, identified the conspirators, and built an airtight case, all while dying. She had practice, Austin said quietly. Our whole childhood, she was the one who saw patterns, who understood people, who planned 3 moves ahead. I nodded. Eleanor had always been the strategist. Charles had inherited her intelligence, but not her patience, not her ability to sacrifice herself for a larger goal. This hearing aid, Cordova said carefully, sealing the evidence bag around it, contains recorded conversations between Charles Russell and Julian Whitfield discussing dosage amounts, timing, symptom management, and estate distribution. It has Charles's voice saying your grandmother's name followed by the phrase, "won't last another month." It has Julian discussing how to falsify the death certificate. The exit twist crystallized the device Charles had dismissed as an elderly woman's disability aid was the weapon that would destroy him. Eleanor's hearing aid, hiding in plain sight for 6 months, had captured every word of the conspiracy. Cordova's hand moved across the evidence bag seal. The zipper sound was soft, final, like closing a book. Eleanor's voice was inside that bag, and it would speak louder in court than she ever could in life. Austin touched my shoulder and said the words I'd been too afraid to hope for. "You can stay with me," Austin said. "Long as you need." The last police car pulled away at 10 a.m., and the silence that filled the house was louder than the raid. Austin sat beside me on the entry steps, the same steps where Eleanor used to wait for us when we were kids, where she'd greet us with cookies and questions about school. The wood was cold beneath us. October in Seattle, the air smelling of rain and cedar, and something sharp I couldn't name. Fear, maybe. Or the absence of it. "Are you okay?" Austin asked. Stupid question, but I'm asking anyway. I looked at the living room through the open door. The poisoned water glass still sat on the table, bagged, now tagged with evidence markers. Yellow tape across the kitchen threshold. Black boot prints on the carpet from where SWAT had taken Charles down. Fake trust documents scattered on the floor pages, curling at the edges. The entry twist crystallized this house where I was supposed to die had become a crime scene. Physical evidence of my survival frozen in that water glass, in those boot prints, in the scattered papers that would prove Charles's guilt. "Okay," I said honestly, "but I will be." Austin nodded. He rested his head on my shoulder without asking permission the way he used to when we were kids, and Mom would leave us alone for too long. His weight was solid, real, alive. We'd both almost died in the same week. Charles had tried the direct approach with Austin, the car accident that wasn't quite an accident, the brake line that had mysteriously failed. He'd tried the subtle approach with me, the poison, the fake concern, the glass of clear water. Eleanor had saved us both. "I keep thinking about her," Austin said quietly. "How she knew, how she planned, how she kept drinking the poison so they wouldn't suspect she was onto them." "She was dying anyway," I said. "The poison just accelerated it, gave her a timeline. 6 months. 6 months to build an airtight case. 7 hours ago, this room held 3 people and a glass of poison. Now it held 2 and evidence tape. The pattern interrupt landed perfectly, the before and after the transformation of attempted murder into documented crime. The way Eleanor's plan had turned Charles's weapon into his prison sentence. We sat there until afternoon, light slanted through the windows until the cold from the steps had seeped into our bones, until the silence felt less like absence and more like peace. By evening, we were at the Harbor Warehouse office. Garrett was already there when we arrived, along with Arthur Hayes, Eleanor's estate attorney. The same man who'd read Eleanor's video will, who'd confirmed the micro SD evidence, who'd been part of Eleanor's plan from the beginning. "The forged trust is invalid," Arthur said, without preamble. He was 62 years old, silver-haired and methodical, the kind of lawyer who'd built his reputation on attention to detail. "Eleanor's micro SD will stand. You and Austin inherit the full estate, $4.2 million, including her Ballard house. The inheritance we'd almost died for. The money Charles had killed for. Julian's conservatorship file was confiscated when they arrested him," Garrett added. He looked tired, his detective's jacket rumpled coffee stain on his collar. It was in his medical office hidden in a locked drawer. The petition was already drafted. He was planning to file it this week, claim Eleanor had been incompetent when she made her real will. But she wasn't, I said. She was sharper than all of us, Garrett replied. Your grandmother chose well. She planned this 6 months before any of us knew what was happening. Before Charles even realized she suspected him. Eleanor had always been 3 moves ahead. Charles had inherited her intelligence, but not her patience, not her willingness to sacrifice herself for justice. Arthur reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small envelope. Cream-colored. Eleanor's handwriting on the front, Audrey and Austin. She left this for you both, he said, placing it carefully on the table. Written 5 months ago. 5 months ago. 1 month before she died. When she was already sick, already weakening, already certain that Charles and Julian would succeed in killing her. How do you write a letter to grandchildren? You know, you won't be alive to see vindicated. The pattern interrupt hit me, the impossible courage of writing final words while still fighting, while still gathering evidence, while still pretending everything was fine. She knew she wouldn't make it, Austin said softly. She knew, Arthur confirmed. She told me she had maybe 4 months left, that the poison was cumulative and irreversible at that point. But she also knew that if she stopped drinking the tea, Charles would suspect. He'd destroy evidence. He'd change tactics. So she kept drinking it. She let him kill her, I said. She let him think he was killing her, Garrett corrected. The difference is Eleanor was in control the entire time. She chose the timeline. She chose the evidence. She chose who would know and when they'd know it. The exit twist crystallized. Eleanor had written this letter 5 months ago, knowing she'd win posthumously, but wouldn't live to see it. Knowing she'd save us from beyond the grave. Knowing her last words would reach us after Charles was already in custody. I reached for the envelope. The paper was smooth, expensive. Eleanor's handwriting was steady. No tremor, no hesitation. She'd written this on a good day when the poison hadn't yet stolen her coordination. Thank you, I said to Arthur and Garrett. For everything. Arthur nodded. The trial will probably be March. King County Courthouse. With the hearing aid recordings and IOT evidence, it should be straightforward. Straightforward. Eleanor's 6 months of dying reduced to a straightforward trial. Outside the warehouse, Austin and I stood by his car. The envelope was in my hand, sealed, waiting. Want to read it? Austin asked. I slid the envelope into my jacket pocket without opening it. Whatever Grandma Eleanor wanted to say to us from 5 months ago, 1 month before she died, I wasn't ready to hear yet. The trial would come first. March would bring Charles and Julian to King County Courthouse in chains. 5 months after the arrest, I sat in King County Courthouse, watching the judge walk to her bench for the last time. March had arrived cold and clear. The trial had taken 4 days. 4 days to present Eleanor's hearing aid recordings, the IOT sensor footage, the forensic toxicology reports, the fake trust documents the conservatorship petition found in Julian's office. 4 days to prove what Eleanor had spent 6 months documenting while dying. Austin sat beside me in the plaintiff's row, his hand gripping mine. Behind us, Arthur Hayes and Garrett Thornton waited with Detective Cordova. The courtroom smelled like old wood and tension, the kind of sterile air that comes from too many people holding their breath at once. Judge Margaret Holloway settled into her seat. She was 58 years old, silver hair pulled back severely, face lined with the kind of authority that came from 20 years on the Superior Court bench. She'd presided over the trial with calculated precision, allowing every piece of Eleanor's evidence, denying every defense objection. The jury had deliberated for 3 hours. Eleanor's case had been that strong. "Will the defendants please rise?" Judge Holloway said. Charles stood. He wore a gray suit they'd allowed him for trial, but the handcuffs were visible at his wrist's chain connecting to the belly shackles beneath his jacket. Julian rose beside him, face pale, hands trembling even through the restraints. 5 months in King County Jail had changed them both. Charles had lost weight. Julian had aged a decade. The jury has reached a verdict in the matter of the state of Washington versus Charles Russell and Julian Whitfield. Judge Holloway continued. Her voice carried across the courtroom without effort, each word measured and final. On the charge of murder in the first degree in the death of Eleanor Russell, how does the jury find the defendant, Charles Russell E.? The jury foreman stood. Guilty, Your Honor. Austin's grip on my hand tightened. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree of Audrey Russell, how does the jury find the defendant, Charles Russell? Guilty, Your Honor. 2 charges, 2 guilty verdicts. The air in the courtroom shifted like pressure releasing from a sealed room. Judge Holloway's gaze moved to Julian. On the charge of murder in the first degree as co-conspirator in the death of Eleanor Russell, how does the jury find the defendant, Julian Whitfield? Guilty, Your Honor. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree as co-conspirator of Audrey Russell, how does the jury find the defendant, Julian Whitfield? Guilty, Your Honor. 4 guilty verdicts in less than 2 minutes. Eleanor's 6 months of evidence condensed into 4 syllables repeated until they became absolute. Judge Holloway picked up her gavel. The courtroom went silent. Charles Russell, she said, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole for the murder of your mother, Eleanor Russell. An additional concurrent sentence of life imprisonment without possibility of parole for the attempted murder of your daughter, Audrey Russell. The gavel struck once. The sound was Eleanor's voice speaking from 6 feet under, louder than she ever spoke in life. Julian Whitfield. Judge Holloway continued. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole for your role as co-conspirator in the murder of Eleanor Russell. An additional concurrent sentence of life imprisonment without possibility of parole for the attempted murder of Audrey Russell. Your medical license is permanently revoked. The gavel struck twice more, 3 times total. 3 strikes, and Charles Russell's life was over. It's over, Austin whispered beside me, but I couldn't look away from the defense table. The bailiffs were approaching, preparing to transport the convicted men back to holding before prison transfer. Charles stood perfectly still, staring straight ahead at nothing. He's not going to turn, I thought. He's not going to look at us. The bailiffs positioned themselves on either side of Charles and Julian. Standard procedure, hands on arms ready to guide them through the side door that led to the holding cells to the transport van to the state penitentiary, where they'd spend the rest of their lives. Charles never turned his head. Julian's face was pale, hands shaking even through the restraints, but he also kept his eyes forward. Not once did either of them look back at the gallery where Austin and I sat. What does a life sentence mean when you've already lost everything that makes life worth living? The pattern interrupt landed the question of whether Charles had lost everything or if he'd never had anything worth keeping in the first place. Whether life in prison was a punishment or just the external manifestation of the emptiness he'd always carried. Austin squeezed my hand. You did it, he whispered. Grandma did it. But I was watching Charles's back as the bailiffs guided him toward the side door. Watching the way he held himself upright despite the chains, despite the life sentence, despite the fact that his children sat 20 feet away and he couldn't spare them a single glance. He never saw us as children, I realized. We were always just obstacles. Dollar signs he had to eliminate to claim what he believed was rightfully his. The exit twist crystallized. Charles wasn't refusing to look at us out of shame or grief or anger. He wasn't looking because in his mind, we'd never been real people. Just numbers on Eleanor's estate documents. Just problems to solve. The side door opened. The bailiffs guided Charles through first, then Julian. The heavy metal door began to swing shut. I waited for him to turn. For one final look. For some acknowledgement that he was leaving behind his son and daughter, that this was the last time we'd be in the same room. But the door closed with a metal click, and Charles Russell disappeared into life imprisonment without ever looking back. The side door closed behind them with a metal click. Dad never looked back at his children because in his mind, we'd never been children. We'd been dollar signs since the day Grandma Eleanor wrote her first will. Outside the courthouse, Austin asked the question I'd been avoiding for 5 months. Austin asked the question on the courthouse steps, "What now?" The March air was cold against my face. Seattle spread out below us, gray streets, gray sky, gray buildings holding gray memories. Behind us, the courthouse held a verdict. Life sentences, justice delivered. Eleanor's 6 months of dying transformed into legal fact. "What now?" Austin repeated. "What do we do with all of this?" All of this. The inheritance. The house. The weight of being Eleanor Russell's grandchildren, of being Charles Russell's children, of surviving something that should have killed us both. I'd read Eleanor's letter in January, 2 months after the arrest, had carried it unopened through October, November, December until New Year's Day, when I finally broke the seal. Her handwriting had been steady, written 5 months before her death on a good day when the poison hadn't yet stolen her coordination. One line had stayed with me: "Don't let grief make you hesitate." The entry twist landed Eleanor's words from beyond the grave, propelling me forward, when I wanted to freeze dead woman's guidance, moving living woman toward a future she couldn't see yet. "I'm moving to Portland," I said. Austin turned to look at me. "When?" "Oh, April. Maybe May. I need space from all of this. The house, the memories, Seattle. I need to be somewhere that doesn't smell like evidence in courtrooms and Dad's cologne." He nodded slowly. "Makes sense. Will we still talk?" The question came out smaller than I intended. Austin smiled, but it was sad around the edges. "Yes. Not every day, but yes." We stood there on the courthouse steps, 3 feet apart, both looking forward at the Seattle skyline. Not hugging, not crying, not collapsing into each other the way siblings were supposed to after trauma. Sometimes healing doesn't look like closeness. Sometimes it looks like two people standing 3 feet apart, both looking forward. The pattern interrupt settled between us, the recognition that we'd survived the same thing but needed different things. Now that blood didn't mean identical recovery paths, that we could love each other and still need distance. "What about the house?" Austin asked. "Grandma's house. Do we sell it, eh?" I'd been thinking about that for months. The Ballard house where Eleanor had lived, where she'd been poisoned, where she'd installed sensors and cameras and fought her last battle. The house that was legally ours, now part of the inheritance Charles had killed for and never received. "No," I said. "We keep it. We don't sell it. We turn it into something that would make her proud." By April, we were standing in Eleanor's empty living room with Arthur Hayes. The furniture had been moved to storage. The evidence tape was gone. The house smelled like paint and possibility. "A shelter," I said, looking at the space, "for people escaping domestic violence, not just a place to sleep, full support. Financial planning, legal aid, job assistance, therapy. Everything someone needs to actually escape, not just hide for a week." Austin walked through the room, measuring it with his eyes. "Like for people escaping abuse." "Exactly like that," I said. "The Eleanor Russell Safe House. We use the insurance money to start $800,000 to renovate staff and run operations for the first 2 years while we secure grant funding. Partner with existing nonprofits for expertise." Arthur was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him since Eleanor's death. "She told me once this house was meant to shelter people, not just hold memories. She said her mother had taken in a neighbor fleeing an abusive husband back in the 60s, and that this house had good bones for protecting people." "Will you help?" I asked. "Legal counsel for the residents pro bono, eh? I'll volunteer every Thursday," Arthur said immediately. "Elder law and estate planning are my specialty, but I know family law attorneys who'll join me. We'll build a legal team." Austin turned to me. "You'll run it from Portland?" "Remotely, yes. You'd be the Seattle liaison, local presence, face-to-face with staff and residents. I'll handle finances, grants, strategic planning. We'll video call weekly." "It could work," Austin said slowly. "It could actually work. A house can't forget what happened inside it, but it can become something else anyway." The pattern interrupt crystallized the house where Eleanor was murdered, transforming into a sanctuary, violence converted to protection, death becoming the foundation for survival. The exit twist revealed itself fully. The Ballard house, where Charles poisoned his mother for inheritance money, would become the Eleanor Russell Safe House, a place where people escaping their own Charles Russells could find safety and support. The weapon transformed into a shield. We renovated through April, painted walls, installed new locks on every door, the kind that couldn't be picked, that gave residents control over their own space. Set up 6 private rooms upstairs, communal kitchen and living area downstairs, office for legal and financial counseling. Hired a full-time director and 2 counselors. Austin handled the Seattle permits and contractor meetings. I managed the nonprofit paperwork from Portland, where I'd moved into a small apartment near Powell's Books. Arthur coordinated the legal volunteer network. By May, we were ready. The sign went up on a Thursday. Austin called me on video chat so I could watch from Portland. The Eleanor Russell Safe House. Below it, in smaller letters, we'd mounted Eleanor's name exactly as she wrote it, her signature from a birthday card Austin had saved from his 18th birthday. The calligraphy was Eleanor's elegant, steady, confident. Her handwriting above the door of the house where she died, welcoming people she'd never meet. "It's perfect," I said through the phone. Austin adjusted the camera so I could see the whole front of the house. Fresh paint, new windows, Eleanor's name in her own hand. "She'd be proud," he said quietly. "She planned this," I replied. "Maybe not exactly this, but she gave us the tools to do something that mattered. The house, the money, the evidence, all of it was, so we could choose what came next." The sign went up in May, the Eleanor Russell Safe House. Below it, in smaller letters, we mounted her name exactly as she wrote it, her signature from a birthday card Austin had saved. Her handwriting above the door of the house where she died, welcoming people she'd never meet. By summer, I was in Portland, and the hearing aid sat on my bookshelf like a question. I sat on the floor of my empty Seattle apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes holding the envelope I'd carried unopened for 6 months. April in Seattle meant rain against windows, the smell of wet pavement rising through the open balcony door. My furniture was gone, my dishes were packed. Tomorrow morning, I'd drive to Portland and start over in a city that didn't know my name, didn't remember the trial, didn't smell like courtrooms and evidence bags. But tonight I had Eleanor's letter. 6 months I'd carried this. Through the raid, the trial, the verdict. I wasn't ready before. I'm ready now. The entry twist settled over me. I'd carried this letter through every major event, waiting not for the right time, but for the right emotional state. Justice had to come first. Charles had to be in prison. The shelter had to have Eleanor's name above its door. Only then could I receive whatever she'd left me. I turned the envelope over in my hands. Cream-colored paper, expensive. Eleanor's handwriting on the front, Audrey and Austin. Arthur had given it to us in October, the day after the arrest. Austin had wanted to open it immediately. I'd asked him to wait. I'd needed to earn it first. The seal broke easily under my thumb. Inside 2 pages of Eleanor's handwriting on matching stationery. Dated May 2023, 5 months before her death in September, 4 months before she knew for certain the poison would kill her. Her handwriting, the way she curved the A in my name. I unfolded the pages carefully. "Audrey, if you're reading this, you made it. I always knew you would. I'm not sorry for what I asked you to carry. You're strong enough. You always were. From the time you were 8 years old and called me crying because your father forgot to pick you up from soccer practice, I knew you had steel in you. Not the cold kind. Charles has the kind that bends but doesn't break. The kind that holds weight. I need you to understand something. I chose this. I chose to keep drinking the tea. I chose to stay in that house. I chose to record everything knowing I wouldn't live to testify. This wasn't something done to me. This was something I did. On purpose. With full knowledge. Because you were worth saving. Austin was worth saving. And Charles needed to pay for what he'd already done to your mother. She wrote this while dying. She wrote this believing I'd win. She wrote this not knowing. The pattern interrupt hit me, Eleanor writing these words while her body failed, while poison accumulated in her organs, while Charles smiled and poured her morning tea and plotted her death. She'd written with absolute certainty that I'd succeed, even though she had no guarantee. I kept reading. Take care of Austin. He's softer than he looks. The car accident Charles arranged terrified him more than he'll ever admit. He'll need you even if neither of you knows how to ask for help properly. You're both too much like me, better at planning than feeling. Take care of yourself. Move if you need to. Sell the house if you want to. Keep it if it means something. The money is yours to use however makes you whole. I don't care about legacy or monuments. I care about you being alive and free. And if you ever feel like it's too heavy, remember I carried it alone for 6 months, and I never stopped believing you'd finish it. I recorded my own murder, Audrey. I documented every dose, every symptom, every conversation where Charles and Julian discussed my death like it was a business transaction. I did it knowing the recordings would outlive me, knowing you'd have to hear them, knowing you'd have to sit in a courtroom and listen to your father discuss killing his mother. I'm not sorry, because the alternative was you dying. Charles had already tried with Austin. He would have tried with you, and I couldn't let that happen. So I made myself the weapon. I made my death the evidence. I made my silence into a trap. How do you carry the weight of someone's absolute faith in you when they're not alive to see if they were right? The question hung in the empty apartment. Eleanor had believed in me completely, had built her entire plan around the assumption that I'd be smart enough, strong enough, brave enough to finish what she started. She died not knowing if I'd survive the poisoned water glass, not knowing if the sensors would upload in time, not knowing if Charles would look at me one final time and realize I'd beaten him. She'd just believed. I kept reading through tears. I didn't try to stop. You're reading this, which means I was right about you, which means Charles is in prison, which means you're alive. I'm so proud of you. I wish I could be there to see it. To see you walk out of that courthouse knowing you won. To see Austin safe. To see Charles in handcuffs. But I'm not there. I'm here 5 months before my death, drinking poison tea and writing letters to grandchildren who don't know they're in danger yet. And I'm not afraid. Because I know you. I know your mother raised you right before Charles took her from us. I know you have her strength and my stubbornness and absolutely zero tolerance for injustice. I know you'll finish this. The exit twist crystallized Eleanor's greatest gift wasn't the censors or the recordings or the meticulously documented evidence. It was this, her unwavering belief in my strength, written before she knew if any of it would work. She'd given me her faith, and that had been the real inheritance. The letter concluded. Don't let what he did make you smaller. Don't let grief make you hesitate. Don't let fear keep you from whatever comes next. You survived. Now live. I love you. Grandma. I folded the letter carefully, creasing it along the original lines. Set it in the box labeled Keep Not Portland, along with the trial transcripts and Eleanor's hearing aid, and the birthday card with her signature that now hung above the safe house door. She'd carried her plan alone for 6 months while poison killed her. She never stopped believing. Even alone, even afraid, even dying. I folded the letter, creasing it along the original lines, and placed it inside the heavy lockbox. She had endured 6 months of slow poisoning to ensure our survival. She never doubted the truth would win. I closed the lid, packed the final box, and got ready for the drive to Oregon. Summer came to Portland with light on the Willamette River, and I woke up in an apartment that felt like mine. 2 months had passed since the move, 2 months of building something that looked like a life from pieces that looked like wreckage. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people, and a living room with windows facing east so the morning sun turned everything gold. But it was entirely mine. No memories of Charles lived here. No courtrooms, no evidence tape, and no lingering scent of my father's cologne. I worked at a nonprofit 3 blocks from the river, handling crisis financial planning for families escaping domestic violence. I spent my days helping people untangle joint bank accounts, secure hidden assets, and build credit in their own names. The entry twist had landed naturally. I had transformed from a helpless victim into a steady protector. I was actively breaking the cycle by using Eleanor's inheritance and my own survival experience to empower others facing the same horrific violence. Every Sunday at 10 a.m., Austin called. We sat with a silence that felt less like absence and more like peace. Charles Russell was in a maximum security prison serving life without parole. He would stay there until he died. We didn't need to forgive him, nor did we need to understand him. We just needed to move forward without him. Trauma doesn't ask permission to reshape you, but you get to choose the form that comes after. The pattern interrupt settled between us, the recognition that we had been reshaped by violence, but were choosing the form of our recovery. We could honor Eleanor's sacrifice without letting Charles's cruelty define our future. When evening came, the long Portland summer light took its time to set. I made a simple dinner and ate on the couch with the windows wide open, letting the river breeze move through the quiet room. Eventually, my gaze drifted to the shelf. Eleanor's hearing aid sat nestled between a framed photograph from her 60th birthday and a small jade plant Austin had given me. The device was small beige and curved to fit behind an ear. It was completely unremarkable. Charles and Julian had thoroughly despised it, openly mocking her declining health. They thought she was weak hard of hearing and confused someone who didn't need worrying about. They had been so beautifully wrong. A whisper recorded is louder than a shout forgotten. The pattern interrupt landed perfectly. The recognition that Eleanor's quiet documentation had been infinitely more powerful than any dramatic confrontation. Her patient listening had outlasted Charles's loud confidence. The exit twist crystallized. I kept this hearing aid not as a grief memorial, but as a symbol of power in silence. The strongest person in the room isn't always the one shouting loudest. Sometimes it's the one listening, recording, and waiting for the perfect moment to speak truth. And to you, listening to my story, remember this. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. Looking back, I wish I'd seen the signs earlier. I wish I'd asked more questions when Grandma started losing weight so quickly. But I also know that Eleanor chose to shield me from the truth until she had ironclad proof. She didn't want me to face my father without evidence. Don't make my mistake of trusting blood over behavior. Family betrayal revenge isn't about anger, it's about justice. The lesson I learned is, this silence protects predators. Eleanor's hearing aid recordings proved that the strongest voice isn't always the loudest. Sometimes it's the one that listens and documents truth. If you're in a situation like mine, gather evidence quietly. Trust your instincts. And if you've read family Reddit stories about inheritance or poisoning, you know this isn't rare. I believe God gave me Eleanor's strength when I needed it most. She taught me that choosing justice over family loyalty isn't betrayal, it's survival. Family betrayal revenge means refusing to let their crimes define your future. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. These family Reddit stories matter because they show we're not alone. Subscribe to Family Betrayal Stories for more real accounts of survival and justice. Like many family Reddit stories, you've heard this one carries a truth we all need to remember. Thank you for staying until the very end. As a reminder, certain details in this story have been dramatized for storytelling purposes, but the core message about truth, justice, and family dynamics remains what matters most.